Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Have you ever found yourself trying to remember something you just learned, and it felt way easier if you tried to explain it to someone, or maybe even just say it out loud? Well, today we're diving into research that explores exactly that, comparing how well we remember things we actively create versus things we just read. This study is all about the generation effect. Think about it this way. If I tell you a word versus if I give you a clue like a large building with many rooms, and you have to come up with the word mansion, which one do you think you'd remember better? The research suggests that actively generating information strengthens your memory of it. It is like your brain gets more engaged when it has to do the heavy lifting to create the memory itself. But here is where it gets even more interesting. We live in a world where we often get information from multiple senses at once, right? Like reading an article while listening to a podcast or watching a video with narration. This is known as multisensory processing, and it can often make things easier for our brains. This idea is called the multisensory facilitation effect. It suggests that when our senses work together on the same piece of information, it can actually reduce the mental effort needed and boost our performance. So the researchers here had a really cool question they wanted to answer. Does the generation effect, that memory boost from actively creating information, get even stronger when we experience it in multiple senses? They wondered if generating a word and hearing it, or seeing it and hearing it, would make that word even easier to remember than just generating it silently or reading it. It is like asking if using more senses to create a memory makes that memory supercharged. To figure this out, they designed a clever experiment. They had participants do two main things. First, they either had to generate a target word based on a cue word, or they just read the word pair. And they did this under three different conditions: a visual-only condition, where they saw the words, and auditory-only condition, where they heard the words, and a multisensory condition, where they saw and heard the words at the same time. After encoding the words in these different ways, they had a distraction task, think a quick math problem to give their brains a little reset. Then they were tested on their memory. So what did they find? Well, the good news is that the generation effect is real. Just like we expected, participants were better at remembering words they had generated themselves compared to words they had just read. This is supported by tons of research out there. However, the second part of their question about multisensory processing was a bit more surprising. They hypothesized that the generation effect would be strongest when participants were using multiple senses during the generation task. But the results didn't quite show that. They found that the generation effect was present in the auditory and the multisensory conditions, but surprisingly, it was much weaker, or even not statistically significant, in the visual-only generation condition. This is where the story gets really interesting, and the researchers had some great ideas about why this might be. They wondered if the visual-only generation task might have been too demanding. Remember, participants had to type their generated word. Typing can be slower and require more attention than just saying a word out loud. They thought maybe there wasn't enough time to really process the words in the visual-only condition, particularly if participants felt rushed. To test this idea, they did an extra experiment. In this follow-up, they gave participants feedback after each generation attempt. This basically ensured that everyone was exposed to the correct target word, even if they didn't generate it correctly themselves initially. And guess what? In this feedback condition, the generation effect showed up strong across all sensory modalities, including the visual one. This strongly suggests that the original visual-only condition might have been hindered by time pressure or task demands rather than a lack of multisensory benefit. So what does this all mean for us? The main takeaway is that actively generating information is a powerful way to boost memory. And while multisensory input can be helpful, it might not always magically enhance memory effects, especially if the individual tasks under different sensory conditions have different levels of difficulty or time constraints. In this study, it seems like the visual generation task might have been a bit too challenging or time-consuming for the generation effect to fully emerge. The addition of sound in the auditory and multisensory conditions seemed to help participants process and remember the generated words better, potentially by reducing that perceived time pressure or offering a redundant cue. It makes sense, right? If you are trying to learn something and you are also trying to type it out very quickly under pressure, your memory might suffer, even if you are actively trying to create that information. Adding an auditory component might be like a gentle nudge or a repeated reminder that helps solidify the memory without adding too much extra cognitive load. Now, it is important to remember that one study doesn't tell us everything. The researchers themselves point out that the word pairs they used might not have been as tightly constrained as in some other generation effect studies, which could explain why successful generation was relatively low. And of course, future research could explore different time intervals for encoding or even directly measure participants' perception of time pressure to get an even clearer picture. But overall, this research is a fantastic step in understanding how we learn and remember. It highlights the power of active learning and suggests that the way we present information, even when it is being actively generated, plays a crucial role in how well we retain it. It is a good reminder that while more senses can be helpful, sometimes optimizing the quality of engagement within one sense, especially when time is a factor, is just as important. What do you think? Do you find it easier to remember things you generate or things you read? And how do you think multisensory experiences affect your learning? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this breakdown helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more explorations into the fascinating world of psychology. We'll see you in the next video.